All right. Can we start call to order our Racial Justice Task Force meeting? Let's do roll call, please.
Mariam Ar-Rahim, Sarah Balgoyan,
Here.
Lynn Branham, Pam Burnside, Brenda Butts, Sam Bindum, Rosita Bird, Ellen D., Alex Evans, Amy Felty, David Harbor, Ryan Hughes, here. Artist James, here. Esther Pat,
Here.
Carolyn Randolph. Henry Ross. Kevin Schneider.
Here.
Susan Silver. Demario Turner.
Here.
Gerald Walter. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm filling in for Sam tonight. He wasn't able to make it. So we will move forward on the approval of the agenda.
And I will second it.
Thank you and thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. And the minutes, if you'll take a moment to review those, and if there's any questions or comments or motions to approve those.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great. Moving right along. Public participation. I do have one form up here from Christina. Is there anybody else that wants to talk at this point? Christina said she would rather wait till we're talking about the community events for her piece, so. All right. Moving on, we have some presenters that are sitting in the dark, kind of. Do we want to put some lights on for you guys? Welcome and thank you. Let's see if we can get some lights on you. Nope. Well. Maybe. So I'm assuming you guys are Alex and Peter, since you're sitting there ready to go. She wants to wait till it's time to talk about the community events, so. Well, thank you guys for being here. If you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about yourselves and what you'd like to share with us, that'd be great.
Good evening. My name is Peter Resnick. I live over here in Urbana, and the reason you're seeing me here tonight is I was chair of the Urbana IDOT Traffic Stop Data Task Force, which I got very good at saying very quickly. This was a task force that took a little more than a year to produce a report for the city of Urbana regarding the traffic stop data compiled by the Illinois Department of Transportation, and in particular, the racial disparities in that traffic stop data. And I'll let Alex introduce himself.
And my name is Alex Batista. I'm the Human Relations Officer for the City of Urbana. My office was responsible for supporting the work of the task force, and we also look into issues of discrimination in employment, housing, public access, and credit.
So we're going to do an overview of the report that the task force made to the city of Urbana. I do want to point out, we have it in 2 volumes. One with lots of statistical information, the other with more of the commentary and our recommendations. This is going to be a short presentation. This is no substitute for actually going through and taking a look at the report. It's rather extensive. When we did it, I was a little disappointed at the time. The Department of Justice put out their Ferguson report, and I thought, oh man, look at all that stuff, and then realized that we were a little volunteer crew. So I'm pretty proud of the work that we've done, but I do implore you to take a look through it. It has a lot of good information. We're going to be going through a couple of the things that are interesting, some surprising stuff, and some stuff that there are several misconceptions about.
And before we start, if you're interested in how to download it, all you have to do is go to urbanaillinois.us and then go to government, which is over at the right, and then come down to where it says IDOT Traffic Stop Data Task Force. That'll bring you to the page for the task force. And as you move down, it's the second item, which is the first volume of the report, and then the second item, which is the second volume, which is the statistical analysis. And so I've opened them for you. The first part is, we'll have this lake view, and it'll contain the executive summary and the 4 areas that were looked at. If you really want to delve into the statistics, those of you that are really excited about statistics, it'll have this fall background, and then when you go through, you will see there we go. The various sections in the statistical report that look into the various disparities. So that's how you get to the report. You can view it online, or if you'd like to print it, you can. If you'd like to request a copy from the Human Relations Office, we'll go ahead and print one and bind one for you and have it available for pickup or mailing, whatever your preference is. So that will start.
So, excuse me. So as I mentioned, the task force was set up to identify racial disparities in traffic stops. This was done at the request of the Urbana City Council. They had a resolution to set up the task force. We divided our work into 4 separate areas. We did a literature review both of the way traffic stops occurred throughout the country and different issues with regard to racial disparities. We had a separate section on the collected statistics. We had a statistician from the U of I help us out with that, who did fabulous work. We did a study of the impact of the community, both literature, and we interviewed members of the community, held sort of fora for the community to come down and talk about issues. And then we did a review of current police procedures and how the police engage with the community. So I do want to point out that the task force was a very short-lived thing. I believe you're very much in the same boat. We viewed this as strictly, we were going to do the study, present a set of findings, present a set of recommendations, but then the real bulk of the work came with the city council, with the mayor, with the police, actually doing this work to engage with the community. And a lot of the recommendations had to do with getting the community engaged and communicating with those different entities. So these are the members of the task force. As I said, I chaired. Dr. Anderson Cobb from over at the university did a great job of including a bunch of the background material. She also was instrumental in our police procedure community engagement section. Patricia Avery, who is the chair of the local NAACP chapter. Sergeant Andy Charles, who is on the Urbana Police Department. Dr. Chettopadhyay, who did, I believe she's in the, what department is she in?
I'm not sure.
Yes. But she was involved in the statistical analysis, among other things. Alejandra Cornell, who is over at the Champaign Human Relations Commission. Dr. Eric Jacobson, who is our city council representative, who did a lot of the research, background literature research. Will Kiles, who's on the Champaign City Council. Chandra Somerville, who worked in community mental health and helped us on several of the topics, and Paul Testa was our statistician. And then, of course, Alex, who you see here, Todd Rent, who is the former HRO, and Tony Weck, who is our administrative support. So I'll go through the timeline just by way of pointing out some things that came out of the report. We started in January 2014, was when it was established. We held our first meeting not until June, once everybody was appointed and we got everything settled. By February of the following year was when we held our town hall sort of forum to hear from the community. By the time June rolled around, so basically a year after we actually started in earnest, we got our first draft of the report. The final draft, after we collected feedback from the community, feedback from the city council, was delivered in October. We had our final meeting then. The final report I presented to the city council in November and into December. In December, the city council accepted the report, And then the real work began. So in January of 2016, little typo, the review by the City Council, by the Human Rights Office started, and that communication began. In March, there were the beginnings of discussion on the report itself and the actions to be taken. Much to my personal amusement, by April of 2016, the City Council decided to bite off probably the hardest bit, probably the least broad and impactful bit, but certainly the most controversial bit, which was changing the enforcement of cannabis possession in traffic stops. This was an important thing to the task force. It widened some of the gaps in fines and other problems that we were identifying, but it was certainly one of the ones that we said, well, the City Council can have fun with this one. We think it should be addressed, especially the fine schedule, but we understand that it is controversial. That's the first one they chose to do. And they continued to review the report, looking at the other recommendations through April. In May was one of the what I consider one of the real important reviews, which was looking at the fee schedule. One of the things that we found in the report was that just by dint of who was being pulled over for what offenses, the lower income community, and in particular the African American community, was being hit hard with fines. Much by accident. Some of it was sort of the double whammy. You get pulled over because you happen to live in a neighborhood where the police are doing extra patrols, and so they're pulling people over to check on simple infractions just to see if any other crime is going on. And of course, in a lower income neighborhood, you're going to have people who have, for budgetary reasons, not paid for their registration before it expired, or not paid for insurance, and of course those turn out to be some of the most expensive fines on the books and can result in suspension of licenses. So because you happen to be in a neighborhood that's getting extra stops, you got extra fines on top of the normal fines you might encounter. So the city is looking at the fine schedule. I think this is an important one that the task force recommended. One of the other things that we recommended was hiring a staff statistician for the police department. The amount of data that we could comb through was tremendous, but it also took a lot of work just to get it lined up. Lots of information that the police started collecting after the task force began, because they suddenly said, and the chief was terrific about this, oh, if we start collecting that data, that will give us great feedback. So they started collecting additional data. Just the collection, the putting it together, and getting that information such that every year you can quickly and simply look at the progress and see what has changed and what's the same is essential. And so they're looking into hiring a statistician. Again, they recently evened up the fines for cannabis paraphernalia to go with the cannabis fines, and now are doing an overall view of the municipal fine schedule. There's a bunch of stuff in the report about community interactions, about police procedures. I do ask that you take a look at those. They're very interesting analysis of why we came to those conclusions.
The only thing that I would add would be, one of the concerns that the city council also had is that when members of the community have these large fines, they previously had 14 days to come up with the money, or else it would go to court. And the city was looking at what could we do to give them an opportunity to have some time to gather that money. They discussed many options, payment plans, the legal issues surrounding those, and they ended with a solution that they would extend it from 14 days to 2 months. So they now have 60 days in which to get with the finance department or the legal department to pay off that fine, and then they will go ahead and engage in whatever procedure makes it so they don't have to go to court. That was an important contribution.
So We took a look at the disparity ratios, and I'm going to toss this over to Alex. I'm a big chicken when it comes to statistics. It was one of my famous D's in college. And I will tell you that I am a chicken, but the statistics is very well laid out in the report, and you can digest it reasonably. So do not be scared like I am. But I do want to point out that and we can take a look at the overall ratios, that disparity index that you're looking at, the ratio, the 1.47, 1.44, what that's telling you is that there's a disparity between minorities and whites when it comes to stops. Those disparities don't look huge on this slide, but as we go forward, I think you'll see as we drill down that those disparities become very clear very quickly. So Alex, why don't you talk about the statistics?
And I'm not a statistician either, but I understand, I've studied them a little bit more so that I could be able to analyze them and comment on them. The first thing I wanted to point out is the very top, Table 1, lets you know how the city of Urbana has been doing with respect to disparities in traffic stops. And you'll see that we've hovered somewhere around 1.107, which was the lowest in 2012. And then the highest that we rose to was in 2009 when we were at 1.56. And what that means is that in 2012, a minority individual was 1.01, a little over, it was almost a 1-to-1 ratio that they would be pulled over. When you get to the highest point, which is 2009, and a member of the minority community was 1.5 times more likely to be pulled over than a member of the majority population. When you look at those, one wonders who's really affected and what is a minority. And so when you look without a disparity, if you look down at the bottom left, you'll see that the way that it falls out, there almost seems to be 50-50, majority population and minority population. So is there really a problem? One of the statistical tools that helps you dig in and look at is there a problem is the disparity rate. And I've gotten lots of questions of how do you calculate a disparity rate? And so I've given you the formula over on the right-hand side. So to calculate the minority population disparity rate, all you have to do is count up all the minority stops, so it's Asian, African American, Latino, add them up, and then divide them by the total stops. Then you grab their percent of the minority population and you divide it over the entire population that's available. And that gives you the disparity rate. So can there be a disparity rate for Caucasians? Absolutely. There may come a time when Caucasian individuals are stopped at a greater rate than their representation in the population. So when we move forward to the next slide, you begin to see when we disaggregate what is the minority, how is that falling out? You'll start to see that the African American community bears the largest majority of the stops. I didn't put the percentage there, but that graphic gives you an idea. The next group would be Asians, and then the last group would be Hispanics. This slide sort of walks you through. So this slide, 1.47, and 2012 we were only 1.07. That's a great number, but that's all of the minorities put together. So one of the things you'll see on this third slide is let's just tease out who's really being impacted. And you'll see that red line is the African American community. And there was a time in 2004 where they were 2 times likely to be stopped. And then in 2010, they went a little bit at, it looks like 2.25 almost. And then they start to trail off. And now in 2013, they're at an all-time low, but it's still, as you can see, over 1.5 times more likely to be stopped. The black line gives you all of the minorities put together, and then you see the other trend lines. The graph on the right gives you an idea of how is the African American community tracking compared to the entire minority community, and then looking at the various communities you'll see Hispanics are consistently underrepresented in traffic stops. Caucasians are close to that one-to-one ratio, and Asian Americans are also consistently underrepresented in the amount of traffic stops. The bottom slide, the bottom figure, it lets you look at the particular minority grouping or majority grouping and see how they're faring across time. So you'll see that the African American community was in 2004 1.99, which we can round off to two times likely to be stopped. That continued into 05. It went higher in 06, went down a little bit in 07, but it's generally been hovering close to that 2 times mark. And then now in 12 and 13, it's started to come down. And the recent figures also show in, I think it's 15, they continue to be coming down. And one of the things that we're interested in is to see that trend continuing to go down. So one of the questions people ask, who's impacted by all this activity? And so Table 3 lets you know it's our community. Of all of the stops, which are roughly around 3,500, 52% or 18,000 are occurring in Urbana, the Urbana residents. You subtract that from the next figure, it'll give you the Champaign number, but Urbana and Champaign combined is representing 75% or 27,000 people. Then when you add the local, which is St. Joseph, and I can't remember the other city, Savoy, now you're at 78% or 28,000 people affected. And then 85% will include individuals that live within 50 miles of Urbana. That takes us to 30,000. We've had a couple of Chicago people affected, 505, which represents 0.01%. And then the majority, it's Illinoisans that are impacted by our stopping activity. One thing I'd like to point out here that's very important to me that I've said at our city council meeting and other places, I'm very proud of our department, our police department. I'm very proud of our city. This is a national problem. You are charged with the very difficult task of looking at the criminal justice system here. That is going to be a very difficult task as well. There are things you will be able to impact and things you can't. There are things that are different jurisdictions that share the same implicit biases, societal errors. And so by no way does our attendance here or this report attempt to in any way undermine or question the integrity of our police force or our police officers. They are operating in a very difficult environment at a very difficult time. Errors have happened in their profession. Errors happen. What we're seeking to do is to really consistently know what is our blood pressure, what is our cholesterol level, and from that perspective, what can we do better? What can we do different? And then perhaps to begin a process that's really already in place, but that could go to the next level, which is quality improvement. Carl Hospital, Provena Hospital, pharmaceutical companies, companies that engage in making pacemakers, they're always looking at their error rate. We want to make nearly perfect pacemakers. We want to deliver healthcare perfectly. We would like to deliver law enforcement service with continuously declining error rates. And so it's from that spirit that I participated and that Peter participated in the process. It's commendable that the police department handled the entire process with grace, dignity, transparency, and openness as we looked with them at what are some ways that we can improve. So I just want to encourage you to take that spirit, which I believe you will, to the criminal justice review that you engage in. In the bottom slide, you'll see that there was a place where the disparities greatly reduced. There are some places where we just, our stopping activity is improved, and that is the distinction between step stops and non-step stops. And I'm going to let Peter talk a little bit about this one.
So the STEP program is the police department's selective traffic enforcement program. There are different kinds of stops the police department makes. Some of them, they're on regular patrols and they notice someone violate a traffic rule and they make a stop. There are different reasons for stops. The selective traffic enforcement program is when there's an area in town where there's a known traffic problem. People are always running this particular light. People are always speeding along this particular stretch. There have been many accidents in this particular corner. And so they will assign an officer strictly to pull over everyone in that area that they spot breaking that particular law, that particular violation. When we looked at the data for the STEP program, when the officers were simply pulling people over consistently based only on the traffic violation in that particular area, the disparities dropped tremendously. And it's an indication that something else other than driving habits is causing the disparities that we're seeing. We did a bunch of literature research as well. There is absolutely no evidence whatsoever that different racial groups drive differently, have different driving habits. There is no information that the number of citations are due to equipment problems, like a particular community has older cars or has more beat-up cars. Those things, when we pull out that data, they look even across the board. What we're seeing is some difference in police behavior, and so a bunch of the examination was what kinds of differences are we seeing? So we called out the STEP data in particular because that is an indication that it's not about the particular kind of driving. It's one of the things that I pointed out to the city council when our report came out. Of course, the News Gazette did a little story on it and an editorial to go with it. And some of the comments were just eye-rolling for me, because some of the comments were, well, the task force said that we should try to get rid of disparities. And so what is that? Quotas on traffic stops and we should be pulling over more white people. And the answer is no. If you look at the data, there shouldn't be a disparity given driving habits, given equipment failures, given all this other stuff. The disparity is coming from somewhere else. It's police practices. And I'm saying that very carefully because some of the police practices are rational police practices that have bad effects and that we have to maybe come up with different practices for. Some of them are unconscious practices, and if we go through the data, most of them are in these categories of we're trying to do something rational, but the outcome is not what we want. In any event, no, we're not looking for a quota. What we're saying is if you see the disparities being rather high, chances are it's because of bad practices. It's not because of some random thing like black drivers drive worse than white drivers. And that's why the STEPS program data is interesting. The other one that I'll point out to you to go take a look at is the Veil of Darkness data, which is they take 2 different times of year at the same time of day where it's close to sundown. And so at this time of year, it's dark at that particular time. And this time of year, it's light at that particular time. And the disparities drop when it's dark outside. So there's at least some indication of at least some bias in if I identify the person, I'm more likely to give them a ticket. Most of the disparities, and I think we go into this in later slides, actually have to do with specific targeted patrols. That they are patrolling neighborhoods. So the disparities we saw in the Veil of Darkness study, relatively small. The disparities that we're seeing in where police are patrolling for extra law enforcement, for extra crime prevention, that caused, or I shouldn't say caused, that was correlated highly with huge disparities. So, and let's go on to that.
The next area that we looked at is what are the top reasons that are the top charges by race? And you'll see that in the Caucasian community, the 2 largest were speeding excessively. Imagine 15 to 20 miles over the speed limit, especially in a residential area. or operating an uninsured motor vehicle. For African Americans, it was operating an uninsured motor vehicle and driving on a suspended license. For Hispanics, unlicensed or operating an uninsured motor vehicle. And then for Asians, speeding. And you'll see in some areas that raise some questions were in the African American community. Generally, those two charges are not ones that lead to the stop. Those usually are you become aware of after the stop. The same thing for the Hispanic, unless they're associated with moving violations. In the report, we also looked in terms of the economic burden. What is the number of charges in terms of 1, 2, 3, or 4 charges per incident? And you'll see the distribution there that for African Americans, the overwhelming majority received 1 violation, but there were several large numbers where they received 2 violations or 3 violations, and then in 202 cases, they received 5 violations or more. And you'll see that that's represented differently by the other racial demographics. In terms of proportion of multiple charges by race, we went ahead and looked at what the proportionalities are, and you can look at them for yourself there. Yes.
I just had a question to clarify. Are these the charges initially brought, or are these the final charges?
It's a good question. And we actually had a lot of trouble teasing that out sometimes because the way that the ticket is written is different than the way the court finding or the fine is written. So these are final disposition numbers. And one of the things that we asked the police to start collecting is what was the initial reason for the stop versus what was the outcome of the stop versus what was the eventual thing the person got fined for. You know, as Alex said, operating an uninsured motor vehicle, you don't find that out until you are pulled over for something else. So, you know, for the most part, what we're seeing is people may get pulled over you know, for certain violations in equal numbers, but of course, if you're being pulled over repeatedly just because of the neighborhood you happen to live in, because there's extra patrols going on, you're gonna get more often caught out for something like operating uninsured than you would in a neighborhood where you're pulled over less often. Just the odds are going to be higher that you happen to get that fine.
Pete, you said you asked the police to start writing down the reason for the initial stop. Are they doing that? Did they change that practice?
Alex might know better. I know they were looking into how to do this. Part of the problem is the ticket only has so much space on it. They did a new sticker on the back of the ticket for our initial request, which they got done, of the type of stop, dividing it into, it wasn't step program, but those kinds of categories, extra patrolling versus, you know, particular traffic. Okay, here's the cop.
Prior to the stop, this is the card that the police used, and it started off at letter A. What was the, in terms of
This is the search,
I'm
yeah, this is
sorry.
the search. We've got separately, there we go.
there we go. And so that wasn't there before. So as a result of the work that the traffic task force was doing, the police department amended their form in the middle and then began to collect this data. So now we have a better idea of what the motive is. And so I don't remember the date, but it happened in the middle. So we should now have a substantial amount of data. And then by the end of the year, we'll have even more data, and then we'll do comparisons. So I hope this answers your question. We were able to do it. Let's see here.
Oh, yeah.
This slide went ahead and showed the disparities in terms of the fines. And you'll see that between African Americans and Caucasians in the area of speeding, the African American fine was less than, but you'll see that asterisk sign, which given the number of cases, makes it an area where we don't have the greatest confidence. You'll see the amount is not, the disparities aren't great in terms of the finding, except for the areas where they're asterisked. They're plus or minus $28, $31. The same for the white compared to Hispanics. You'll see $3, $8. There is a place $72 versus $63, and some of those are related to, if I recall, the types of tickets that were issued and the incidence of tickets that were issued. One thing that I found interesting from this particular slide, and again, this is those cases that made it to court, when you start looking at those activities that when you look at speeding 15 to 20 miles an hour, imagine 30 miles is the speed limit, so you're going 45 or maybe even 50. Generally, the police are going to stop you no matter who you are. You could probably be the mayor, you're still going to get pulled over. And so when we look at those numbers, they begin to more closely approximate the population, and then disparity goes down. So there are many places where the policing function doesn't have high disparity rates. And so that's comforting because that means that we can extend that practice to some of the other areas. Did you want to talk about this, or do you want me to?
You can go on with the searches, yeah.
So the other area that the task force looked at is the actual searches of vehicles. And you'll see that in 2007, for example, this is all searches, for Caucasian individuals, 111 searches were conducted and contraband was found only 35 times. So that gave the officers a hit rate of 31.5. Those of you that are into baseball and other sports can appreciate that number. For African Americans, they were searched and mindful that they're less percentage of the population, 166 times, and contraband was only recovered 46 times. So that gives a hit rate of 27.7. And you'll see the highest hit rate for Caucasians was in 2013, where they only conducted 60 searches, but over half of the time they found contraband. And in the African American community, the best that they were able to achieve was 39.9% hit rate, and that was in 2013. And they conducted 110 searches, and they recovered 43 times contraband. You'll see in the bottom slide, well, let's talk about only those searches where the officer sought consent from the person. This is a situation like, do you mind if I search your car? And you'll see that the highest hit rate for Caucasians was in 2008, where they asked 5 times and they recovered 4 times for an 80% hit rate. You'll see that for African Americans, the highest that was achieved was in 2013. They asked 9 times and they recovered 5 times out of those 9 for a 55% hit rate, which a 22% error rate.
And so the naive interpretation of these numbers is, well, clearly white people keep more contraband, so you should pull them over more and ask for consent more, ask for searches and do searches more of white people. That's the silly way of interpreting these numbers. The better way, I think, is to say what's going on is the police are doing more searches in the African American community because of the way that they're patrolling those areas. They are looking for other crimes, and so they increase the number of searches, and they get lousy hit rates because of that. Consistently, the searches do not result in all that much of use, especially when it comes to consent searches. They've gotten better about doing them. It's not entirely clear why they ask the question, because generally, finding probable cause to do the search, it's usually more than a gut reaction, and if the officer can state that, it turns into not a consent search. But I think the key takeaway here is that because of the pattern of patrolling, because of the pattern of policing, you end up affecting more people, doing more searches, and getting less out of it. And if you do more directed policing instead of this sort of broad, we're going to pull over everybody in this neighborhood, you actually get better results.
Another important observation to make is that the police department is not asking permission to search vehicles that often. As you can see, they're under 10 throughout the years for Caucasians, and they're under 12 for African Americans. Aggregating them all up, 41 times for the entire Caucasian population, and 60 times for the African American population. The majority of the searches are happening incident to probable cause and other factors. Finally, in Table 15, one of the things that the task force wanted to look at is how is traffic stops relating to cannabis and perhaps searches. And you'll see, for example, in 2010, that they run about the same in terms of percentages, total incidents, but then when you start disaggregating them and looking at them in particular, in traffic, they're running about the same. In cannabis, you start to see a huge disparity, with 64% for African Americans and 33% for Caucasians. When you then combine them, you continue to see that disparity with 72% for African Americans and 28% for Caucasians. And that number continues throughout as you look at 2015. In 2015 for cannabis, it improves, 43% for Caucasians and 55% for African Americans. But when you combine them, 33% for Caucasians and then almost doubling it for African Americans. So when we get into drugs and the war on drugs and these kinds of issues is when we begin to see some of these disparities. And so perhaps that's one of the things that weighed on the city council when they looked at cannabis possession, cannabis paraphernalia, and then the fine structure.
And on that point, I mean, again, we did quite a bit of literature research. The use rates between races, relatively identical. There is not the disparity in use. So this, again, is pointing toward a way of policing, of doing those searches when maybe the search wasn't, when that search wouldn't have happened in a different neighborhood. When a good bit of the statistical data indicated that when the police were in a particular neighborhood for other crime prevention purposes and therefore heavily policing, folks who, if they lived in a different neighborhood, wouldn't get pulled over because you only pull over so many traffic stops, you've got better things to do as an officer. Those folks got stopped in the neighborhood where the additional policing was going on. And we weren't seeing literature evidence that doing generalized traffic stops to prevent crime in a particular high crime neighborhood was actually effective. Doing targeted traffic stops in front of a particular house where cars are pulling up, where there is known drug activity, or doing traffic stops near a particular place where different kinds of crime is taking place, that actually resulted in lowering crime statistics. Doing generalized traffic stops, there was no literature to indicate that it actually helped. So the literature seems pretty clear that if you do targeted traffic stops near for particular crime reasons, you're looking for a particular make and model of car, and so you pull over every one of those, or you do traffic stops in front of a particular property that happens to have a high crime activity going on there. That's effective. That lowers crime rates. But no, and I put it this way particularly because we simply could not find any evidence in the literature that doing traffic stops in a particular neighborhood broadly changed the crime rate. What changed the crime rate was the targeting traffic stops, not generally doing more traffic stops in this particular area.
I'd like to spend just 3 minutes, and we're almost done. Volume 1, we're all pressed for time. We'll give you a very nice executive summary of the study. So I recommend that you read a 3-page executive summary found in Volume 1. Towards the very end of Volume 1, and this is where there's hope and good news, page 33, you will see the recommendations of the task force. The task force issued 19 recommendations, and it clustered them into 4 categories. And so you'll see that the first category is recommendations for continuation and expansion of recently instituted changes. And you'll see them as 1.1, which is what Esther talked about, beginning to label the stops as whether they were a traffic stop, patrol stop, or a community caretaking stop. 1.2, there's been training on implicit bias, and they recommended additional ongoing training, and so we're looking at that at the City of Urbana. Recommendation 1.3, that there be an ongoing evaluation and reevaluation of the efficacy of traffic stops, and to develop, as Peter has mentioned at least 3 times during this presentation, a strategic approach. There is an approach within the police department, but there's always an opportunity to be much more methodical, and that's where some of the magic lies. Section 2 deals with statistical recommendations, and this is where the council acted with 2.1, and we are going to be hiring a statistician for the police department, and they're going to help us with bringing on board a review of data on a consistent basis, and using that data to question how police function can improve. You'll see at 2.2 that we're very committed that the data be available. And so there is a data portal where people can pull that data and analyze it for themselves. And we're going to continue to expand that data, open data portal, so that the University of Illinois, all of you, members of the community, can look at that data and see what's going on. Recommendation 2.3 requests that the City Council become involved in the consistent review of the statistical data. And then finally, 2.4, that, that we detail out, disaggregate some of the data so that we can zoom in even closer, as we did with some of the other demographics. Section 3 dealt with policies and procedure recommendations, and so you can read all of those. And one of the truly, some people may consider it fuzzy or warm fuzzies, is Section 4. Section 4 deals with community engagement. One of the things that I consistently hear, mothers and fathers of minorities are extremely concerned for the well-being of their children, as well as the minority persons themselves, whether they're because of national issues, because of harms or errors that have occurred to family members. There is this, call it reasonable or unreasonable, fear that I'm not safe in this interaction, that I need to call somebody, Mom, I'm being pulled over, or cousin, I'm being pulled, and I'm in danger. And there is also an overwhelming concern about, does government care? Is government doing anything about this? Is there hope? And so Section 4 really goes to beginning to reach out to the community and heal some of these tensions and understanding each other better, government, police, and the community. And so the task force began suggestions that can move us forward in that process. And so my office is really going to be involved and concerned with the statistical pieces, Section 2, and with Section 4, which deals with that community piece. And so going out and things like making sure that people understand what are the expectations of a person being pulled over? What can they expect from the police department? I'm in the middle of the Citizen Police Academy, and one of the presentations that was delivered that was very nice was when an officer pulls you over, this is what an officer is supposed to say to you. This is how they're supposed to behave. This is what you can expect. And this is what you're responsible for doing as a citizen when you're pulled over. So things like that can begin to share not just awareness, but expectations. And if those expectations are not met, that, especially in our American society, you have a right to review, and you have a right to complain. You have a right to ask that this particular stop be reviewed. And sometimes I get commentary that, oh, you all aren't going to do anything, or oh, nothing's going to happen. Malarkey. In the city of Urbana, we will review it. My office is part of that. We have a civilian police review board that is part of that. And so we're going to be spending quite amount of time this year and next year getting the word out of how robust the review is, how transparent the review is. You just can't sweep things under the rug. It's going to be looked at. And our police chief is pretty amazing at looking at, it's actually a complaint to him. And he appoints an investigator that then reviews the conduct. He makes a determination. If the complaining party does not agree with his recommendation, then they may appeal it to the Civilian Police Review Board, and then we conduct an inquiry in a closed session to see what happened there. And so Section 4 gives ideas of what can be done within the community context. And so I said it started on page 33 and it ends on page 36. So that's 3 pages that'll give you an idea of the beginning, not a comprehensive and exhaustive list, but the beginning to help the city move forward. And for my piece, I'd just like to close with saying, I think the police department does a very good job. I think that my office, their office, government can always do better. And that is our goal, to see how we can do better. Sometimes it's uncomfortable getting on the scale and seeing how much you weigh, especially after the holidays. It's uncomfortable, some people, to do your glucose monitoring. I have a couple of relatives that have destroyed their glucose monitors. But it's important to see where's our blood sugar, where do we need to be, and do we need to start amending our diet or change some of our modifier practices so that we can begin to deliver service that doesn't have quite as many disparities.
And I will say, by way of conclusion, we recognize right up front in the report, this is about traffic stops, which seems like a very small area, but it's an indicator of a broader issue. And whatever piece of this issue you bite off to work on, it will have knock-on effects for other racial issues that you're going to encounter. So, you know, we would sometimes get people would get frustrated about being in the weeds of the statistics or of the particulars of traffic procedures, but all of these things have great effect in just changing the way people think about the issues. That, oh, someone fears for their life in a traffic stop. Why is that? And what is that experience like? And getting officers to think about that issue, getting folks in the community to think about my experience might be different than this other person. That's all exceedingly important. So if you all have any other questions.
Yeah, you've got your disparity statistics based on proportions of the population in different racial and ethnic groups. Where did that baseline population info come from?
A lot of it's from census data, and we did a lot of churning about how to establish what the driving population is. And the numbers, and there's some discussion of it in the report, the numbers are as representative as we could pull off. There just simply are no clean numbers about racial makeup of the driving population in any particular area.
I'm just curious because Hispanic is not a racial categorization in the census. It is not. It's an ethnic categorization, and you can be black, you can be Asian, you can be white.
And now
that's why I'm just asking about that. And then how are people categorized at the traffic stop?
At the traffic stop, it is, I believe, by best guess of the officer.
Okay. So a black person could be Hispanic.
I'm imagining that's true, and I don't know that I'm going to be able to find it quickly.
Well, you don't have to know now, but I was just curious because this troubles me when I see this done all the time.
One of the things that we're going to do is, for the most part, take your questions down and get back with you with a detailed answer, not overnight, but over a period of time. So we do encourage the questions. Some of them will be speaking to the statistician, some of them to some of the task force members. So I do want to encourage, but we may not have all the answers for you today. We did use the survey, the census data, and we can probably explain a little bit how we did that. Thank you.
In a way, that's actually probably better, because then you have the officer's perception of who they're dealing with. So I don't see that as a big problem, although it's interesting. I have a multi-question that'll be real fast to answer. Is this being adopted in whatever sense of the word that means? Are the datas and the way you're looking at thing being looked at by the Champaign Police, the University Police, and the Sheriff? Because it looks like this is a wonderful, excuse me, basic tool and study that other departments could look at and say, wow, that's a good thing to look at. Let's see what we can do too, not just with the data, but even more importantly with the recommendations.
I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know the answer to that. They're aware because of the news press, and the chiefs meet, I think, monthly, if not biweekly, and so they communicate. I'm sure they're asking the chiefs are asking the Urbana chief, how's your process going over there? So they're aware. As I mentioned, everything's on our website, and as well as the data, so they do have access to it.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing in particular.
Also, with respect to the data, as I mentioned, we hope to have the statistician hired by August, and once that happens, we're going to be striving to produce consistently, with great frequency, reporting and cleaning up some of that reporting. This really built the foundations for the work we're going to be doing. It was just an awful amount of work trying to link up with the courthouse and trying to link up with the county. And so over the next few years, there'll be an opportunity to build some of those, I forget what the computer term is, matching.
I do have one question. First of all, thank you for your very well detailed presentation. I appreciate you sharing that. And you may have covered this already, but I may have missed it. Someone asked this question. Are there any implications or incorporation of the use of the canine dog in the statistical analysis with respect to the searches, consensual and non-consensual?
I don't believe we separated it out. We were aware of the issue, but I don't believe canine searches versus other types of searches were separated in our data in any particular way.
I have several questions. My first is, you mentioned having some statistical assistance from, I believe you said somebody from University of Illinois, is that right? Could you give us a few more details, and did you pay? And here's why I ask, because I guess maybe this is a blended question, because we do not have any assistance. So if you could first tell us how much assistance you got, and then, again, recognizing that our charge is going to look at a lot of areas beyond traffic stops, your comments about our ability to complete this task, or how we do this without any statistical assistance.
So the short answer to the question is Paul Testa, who is a PhD student at the university, was a member of the task force. And he did the bulk of the heavy lifting for no reimbursement. So we got lucky. We had a motivated and energetic human to actually do that work. But as Alex said, with the hiring of the statistician at the city, at least for this kind of stuff, you may be able to get the data out from us. Now, if you want to collect different kinds of data, non-police data, that obviously is going to be trickier, and finding a volunteer would be exceedingly helpful.
Okay. And then another question that I had, you talked about, it looked like in your recommendations, which I'm really looking forward to reading. By the way, I just thought your presentation, it was just so thorough and helpful, and I really appreciated your recommendation about the spirit of this, and not a spirit of condemnation, but how can we do things better. I think that's very helpful to keep in mind. But it looks like one of the recommendations is about training, about implicit bias, and that, of course, is focused at Urbana. Do you have any sense of, would that be equally valuable, and could it be accomplished on a county-wide basis? So in other words, instead of having each department do that and separate training costs, do you think that could be done county-wide?
So the PTI, the Police Training Institute, already does, as part of their current training, the implicit bias training for their students. So some of the recommendation was that should be done for officers who are already working, who might not have gotten the training that is now in place. absolutely believe across the board, the implicit bias training is vital. Simply because, to a certain extent, people don't recognize it until it's pointed out to them. The idea that even if you subconsciously have these different kinds of biases, and they need not be bigotry, they can simply be unconscious bias of a difference, it will cause all sorts of disparity and all sorts of problems. I always recommend to people the Harvard Implicit Association Test. They have a website where you can go do this for yourself. And they will collect the data anonymously, but it's very revealing to see what little implicit biases each of us has, whether it's race or gender or there's a number of them. But yes, I recommend it highly.
Okay. And then my final question is simply, many of the steps we recognize we'll have to take, the literature review, et cetera, but we aren't, as I say, there yet. We're about to start community forums to get community feedback, and then we'll be doing, I think, dividing up subcommittees, doing literature review, and really digging deep into particular areas. But again, because of what appears to me to be just very impressive work coming out of your task force, I wondered if you had any recommendations for us, because I hope that we can produce some work that has a real impact in this county.
I will say for myself, I felt like the decision to split it up into different areas and have subgroups work on stuff was very helpful. We had 10 people on the task force, which was not quite enough for 4 different groups, because we ended up with some stuff, someone, had to go on leave, someone had to, a couple of these folks were professors and finals time comes around, or writing a journal article time comes around, and we'd lose someone for too long a period of time, and it was a race toward the end. You've got a few more folks to deal with, just the makeup of your particular group, so you've got a better start at that, but I would recommend that you have backup folks so that you've got enough people working on it. And the other problem, of course, is always people will arm wrestle over particular issues. It's inevitable, and I think you just have to have good leadership in each of the subgroups to sort of get people on board with, okay, yeah, this is going to be tricky, this is going to be, controversial, and we're going to work through it. But beyond that, I think the idea of splitting up the task was very useful for us.
To speak to your question about implicit bias is a big deal. It has huge impact. There is that bias that's not unconscious, that, people have a bias. They don't like a particular group, or they feel that a particular group is a certain way. Even in that category, their training can be helpful. With implicit bias, that can be in some ways the most impactful, because it's good people like you and like Peter and myself that have a bias operating below our level of consciousness. There was a movie that someone emailed me to please watch this movie, and I watched it. And it's an individual who talks about how he was exposed, a Caucasian was exposed to the African American community very early, and he's been a champion of the African American community. And he painfully acknowledged that one day he was boarding an airplane, and he looked, as he's looking at the pilots, he sees that there are 2 African American pilots, and his concern was, uh-oh, should I get off this plane? Because there's not even at least one white pilot. And, and he says in his program, I was something to the effect of ashamed that thought operated below my level of consciousness. And he had to grab that thought and say no and put it away and achieve a place of peace and continue on taking his seat and enjoying that flight. And of course, it was a wonderful flight for him. So I liked watching that movie. It was good for me on many points, but that one example was good because here's this very well-meaning person that had to have this painful exposure with. And, with implicit bias, it's not one of those things that you can meditate about. You can't sit down and wonder, where are they? They're inaccessible to you. They're below your radar. You only confront them in situations and when others point them out, or when you take tests as assessments, as Peter mentioned, or when somebody does a statistical study and says, uh-oh, we've got these disparities, and then we're sitting there like, oh, what can we do better? Which was one of the reasons statistics can be very helpful as you're looking at the statistics of your criminal justice system. In terms of your, the question on statistician and money and resources, the task force had the same budget you have. I believe you had $500. We also gave the task force.
Oh, you have zero.
I apologize.
We have 500
We have
bucks more than
500
you.
bucks. And so my office, the Human Relations Office, administered that, and we were prepared if the task force needed a little extra money to provide that extra money. Another key aspect is that my office was instrumental in always being there to handle the logistics and supporting the task force. And so my predecessor, who's promoted to the director of HR, began the journey. He took the plane off with Peter, and then I came in the middle and helped land the plane with Peter. And so I think that a staff person that at the county that can assist you with some of the logistics, keep the commission moving, reach out to the parties at the so one of the task force members and the office reached out to the statistician, got him to join and volunteer his work. There are more at the University of Illinois that would be interested to help you in that way, especially it helps them build their career. So I would recommend that you reach out for help. You might want to reach out for a writer that can help you with some of the organization. I was privileged that each of the committees drafted their sections, and then Peter helped stitch them together into the quilt that you have in front of you, and then I took on the formatting and arranging, a little minor arranging, so that a final product could be delivered. So I would recommend some staff support.
The staff support is, if you can get it, pretty key.
So you mentioned that you guys did a kind of forum at the beginning and you had the community come out. What did you do with that information? Did you compile it? Because I think some of the findings that you may show the kind of cultural bias, not necessarily implicit bias, but cultural bias that comes along, and it might tease that area out.
Yeah, the community impact group collected that data together, used it. It was more narrative informed. Some of it we unfortunately lost in one of the transitions, but I think the results of the forum itself and getting people to do commentary and writing that stuff down and listening and recording it was very helpful. We made an attempt at a survey, got some data out of that survey. I don't know how helpful that was to the committee. It got some decent quotable material where we could say that's the kind of thing we were talking about. So that was helpful at some level. Patricia Avery led up that committee, and I'm sure that she would be available if you give her a yelp to chat about how that went. I think we also ran out of time on we would have loved to have done more of those forums. The first one was getting our feet wet as to how this thing would run. You have to leave the opportunity for some people to vent. This is a very anger-inducing topic for a lot of folks. And then doing some private conversations, some more one-on-one. We really wish we had the opportunity to do different, angles of forums. So, yeah.
I will email to your chair, Samuel, the survey tool that was administered at the town hall meeting so that you have it. You could do that. I would also recommend perhaps something that's Scantron or something that, somebody can help you with the data entry. It will really help you with some of the qualitative pieces of the experience, and one thing that we didn't get into, again, we were very surgical and very limited in terms of what we could accomplish and what we needed to get done. One thing that might be interesting is, what is the subjective perception of the community of where we are at this point in time? We have different ideas, depending on the places we come from and the places we live, in terms of how urgent a situation is. And so that can be very illuminating. So I will get that out to you in the next few days, and that could really help you.
Yeah, that would be great. We've got our first forum next Thursday, so we're working on kind of a tool.
You'll
as
have it
well,
tomorrow
so
then.
Thank you so much.
On your budget, did you request that budget, or did they just give that budget to you? And a follow-up, did you spend it all, or how did you handle the money?
I believe it was in the original resolution. I don't believe we asked for any money in particular. As far as spending it, where did it go?
Yeah, it was in the resolution, and I believe that the office and the mayor knew that we would need some amount of money. I believe we spent 75% of it, so, and it went to some food items, the town hall meeting, some copying, some binding, and minor expenses related to that.
I just had a quick question. I know your research was limited, but did you do any work on when traffic stops escalated to resisting arrest or other criminal?
Mostly literature research. We did some review of the literature on this. The occurrences in town, we didn't have really enough data to go on. I'll just spend 2 minutes on the topic because it mostly appears in the community impact section. One of the papers that we read, and I had this visceral reaction to it, written by 2 researchers in the area and African-American men, and described the experience of a traffic stop and getting pulled over, and how would you feel was the more or less the aim of it, aimed at folks who were white, and saying, let's say you get pulled over and then you know, the officer talks in a very terse way and asks you to get out of the car and put your hands on the car and frisks you and makes you sit on the curb while they look around the car, and how would that make you feel was the point. And what I found interesting was I disagreed with their conclusion, because I think what they were aiming for was you would feel very upset and frightened, and it would be very disturbing. And I will tell you that as a white man, my reaction was, if that ever happened to me, I would stomp into the mayor's office the next morning and read the riot act to the mayor and insist that the mayor call the chief and that officer down. And it's because it's a matter of privilege for me, right? As a white man, I don't feel fear for my life by confronting that officer. And most black men do, and justifiably so. I mean, there's a good historical experience there of things escalating. And one of the things that we talked about was when you have someone in the car who already is in a state of fear, not just, oh God, my insurance is going to go up and my dad's going to be, pissed off that I got this ticket, but fear for my physical safety. And an officer who is listening for that fear, listening for that escalation, that's exactly how those tragedies occur, because of the escalating emotions there. So, yeah, we had discussion about it and looked at the literature on it, but we didn't have enough local information to really flesh it out.
I'd just like to add, fear is a big issue. You know, fear can then lead to anger and can lead to violence. So your question is just extraordinary. One of the things that I'm concerned about, coming into the office, people ask me, whose side are you on? Are you on the side of police? Or are you on the side of people stopped? Are you on the side of employers? Are you on the side of employees? Are you on the side of, what's your important demographic? Are you concerned about the Latinos? Or are you concerned about the blacks? Are you even concerned about the women? And the way I'm built, I'm pretty concerned about all of the groups. I'm concerned about equal pay for women. I'm very concerned when we look at this data that in terms of the minority experience it's the African-American community that experiences the bulk of the disparity. And so like any emergency room, they're the headshot wound, and they're the ones that need immediate assistance. I give you that prelude to say this. I am concerned about people that are stopped. I'm also concerned about police officers' safety. And as the fear continues, there's this, and you can see it in the national data and the national experience. Each stop, or the stops are experiencing much more emotion, much more higher stakes about safety. You know, these people don't know who each other are. They're strangers to each other for the most part. The officer and the subject being stopped. And not to get into your jurisdiction, but as you're looking into the jail and everything, I would only imagine that it's the same thing there. There's perceptions, there's concerns about safety, there's concerns about who are you and what did you do. And so the more we're able to look at outcomes and data, I'm not a data guy per se, you know, the data should never drive the total decision, but it's a piece of the puzzle. And so when you're looking at types of offenders, types of crimes, durations of stay, and things like that, those may help you begin to see whether new or tailored approaches are necessary. So one of the things that I'm interested in moving forward, to respond to 3 of your questions, is this really taught us at the local level how to look at data and how to disaggregate information. So I imagine over the next couple of years, we're going to be looking at disparities of all crimes in Urbana. So we can get a sense of where are these trend lines doing? How is underage drinking doing? How is curfew violations going? How is fining happening in this area? So that we can have sort of a pulse on it. And one of the things that I made a note of is to look at escalation in stops and what is our trend line and what is our ratio there.
Just a comment, and you guys don't have to comment unless you feel like you should. And I don't think anyone have got this type of data, but I'll be interested in knowing the data on police relationship in the community, if they live in that community that they serve. I just wonder how would that play out. But just a comment, you know.
We didn't look at it, and I think you're spot on. It's an interesting topic.
And we're going to look at it, I promise. Because it's something that Caroline had talked about earlier, and which is why I'm going to send you that survey. It is important to understand what I have in healthcare. They teach you, at least at a very reputable healthcare organizations, the perception of the patient, right or wrong, is it. If the patient is telling you they have pain, you're going to deal with that. If they're saying that they're not being respected or treated well or not being considered in their care, they're the authority. And so we can borrow a little of that in terms of the perception of the community needs to be understood and responded to. Whether it's rational or irrational is a separate question, a related question, but a separate question. What is their experience? Because their experience then governs their response and their interaction. It also can stimulate the police response, and then we get into cycles. So I am deeply interested in knowing what is that. And a couple of times when I'm driving into work, I've been thinking about what is the methodology that we could use to really do a climate assessment in some of these areas that have high policing, so we can get a better sense of what is their subjective experience and impact. And actually the report recommends one of those, doing impact studies.
I actually would like a clarification about your question. When you said community, do you mean Urbana, police officers from Urbana, or do you mean particular areas of a community? Because community can be used in different ways, that word.
What I'm really referring to is that, and I spoke to the city council, you have people that live outside Champaign, like I said, or outside of that. If we say outside the school district, about it, is some, only time they come here is to do the police. Now, if they live within that community, how good is the relationship between them and the community that they serve? How good the relationship be between the Champaign police officer, if they say they live in the city of Champaign?
And some of those issues are experienced in the state prison system. You'll have some areas where heavily Caucasian populations, and the only time they really interact with African-American people is when they arrive at the jail. And then they're having this interaction under very stressful power dynamic situations. I don't know if either of the police forces release publicly their residency distributions, what percentage of their officers live in town or out of town, and by what. I would imagine it's something that we could do down the road that would give us a picture. It would be something we might look at in terms of, is there a correlation between out of residency and in residency, for that very purpose, to identifying what is the level of ongoing relationship building.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate your time and all your work.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking this on.
Yeah.
Big task.
If you want to stick around for just a couple minutes, the next item on our agenda actually pertains to this too, just for you to hear.
Yeah.
So we do have criminal justice system overview on our agenda. Is that an assumption or a?
I was not successful at getting anyone to come, but I did interview somebody and have some information. So I don't know if that falls under this or falls under comments from task force members.
Since we're talking about that, Susan, you know AJ Rivera,
No.
the prosecutor? He contacted me and would like to participate in that particular issue, to give an overview of the criminal justice system. He's a former police officer, prosecutor, and now defense.
So I'm wondering if, well, one, that would be great, and two, looking at the time and what we have left on the agenda, would it be all right? Can we do this? Put it off till next time? Okay. Do you guys think do we need to vote on that?
We have to vote on it. I don't remember the term. It's not tabling.
Postpone consideration. I move to postpone, right, which is the same thing as Robert's Rules of Order. I move to postpone consideration of community justice system overview until a July meeting, or it's later than that, what do you think?
Whenever,
Probably a July.
A July meeting.
when we can, is that okay?
That's fine. I will not be here on the July 12th meeting, but I'll be here the later meeting in July.
So maybe we'll try to coordinate it
second
with the
meeting in July.
presenter and with you at the same time and, okay.
Second.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just changed my motion to make it the second.
The second
yeah, and that was
meeting in
in
July.
and we were seconded by Kevin.
All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is a statement of support for Urbana City Council's resolution. We discussed it and agreed on it last time, but it wasn't officially on the agenda. Thank you. Thank you. Maybe we could put it up or read it out loud just so that our public participants. Oh, all in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Sorry, Ryan.
Our formal statement, which I'll send out by way of a press release to local media, and hopefully someone, perhaps myself, can read this at certainly Urbana City Council meeting, maybe other city council meetings. Says, the Champaign County Racial Justice Task Force commends the Urbana City Council for its recent action to reduce the disparate impacts city fines have on minority populations. The City Council acted on a specific recommendation by the Urbana Traffic Stop Data Task Force, which found clear racial disparities in the number of traffic stops, the number of violations cited, and the amount of fines for those violations. The data-driven decision to reduce the minimum fine for possession of small amounts of marijuana was made after additional research, public input, and discussion. The Racial Justice Task Force supports the City of Urbana's continued efforts to act on the recommendations of the Traffic Stop Data Task Force and urges other public bodies in Champaign County to take similar steps to identify and resolve racial injustices in the local criminal justice system. So, very appropriate after your presentation.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is community events. Christina, do you want to go? Thank you.
To interject, who seconded the motion on that one? Mariam, thank you, Mariam.
I'm just actually reflecting on recent events in Champaign-Urbana, specifically the 3 deaths that have happened in the county jail in the past 6 months. And I'm a little bit emotional tonight because I'm a human being, not a robot. And as many of you know, this is something that I work on and have worked on for many, many years, criminal justice issues and prison justice in particular. But I'm trying to remember if anybody was here for the county board meeting on Tuesday. Was anybody here for that? Okay, so I'm just assuming that everyone's aware that Veronica Horsted died in the jail last Friday, June 10th, so that joins Paul Clifton, who died in March of this year, and Toya Frazier, who died December 1st of 2015. And for those of us that work on these issues, I specifically work with build programs, not jails, but there's a lot of community groups that have come together on this. This is really unacceptable to us. 3 deaths in the jail in 6 months is unacceptable, and it's a crisis. And the lack of response from the county, to me, is atrocious. So for Tuesday, what happened was some of us that work specifically in reentry or work with people that have lived through the criminal justice experience in build programs, not jails, but also in CUCPJ and also in the BLM chapter, worked really hard over the weekend to bring individuals to the county board meeting to share their experiences of having gone to the jail, shared similar experiences to things like Toya Frazier suffered through heroin withdrawal. There were family members there that all spoke on Tuesday night and shared their experiences. And I know that people are busy and weren't able to hear those experiences, but those stories were really honest and really horrible. And they took what I can only imagine to be like a wellspring of courage to be able to go into a room like this and sit at this formal desk with all these people staring at you with pretty blank faces, to be honest, which frustrated me. So again, I'm not angry at this group. I'm expressing my frustration with Tuesday's group, to be honest. And they shared really intimate details about their lives with the county board. And after these testimonies were borne to the county board, not one single board member, not one said, I am so sorry that this happened to you. You shouldn't have been treated this way. I am so sorry that you lost your family member. This is a crisis and we need to fix it. Not one person expressed emotion to these people who came here and shared their stories with them, who have such a lack of trust in this process. And I've only been here for 3 years, and people have been coming here for many more years than that, asking for some humanity from this county authority. And I was dumbfounded that not a single county board member had anything to say to these people who came here and shared these experiences with them. And I'm sorry that I'm emotional now. I was just really floored by that because I was very proud of those individuals who came and shared those things. That's a really hard thing to do, I can only imagine. And so the one thing that was told to an organizer after this event by one county board member the next day in private was how pleased he was that nobody got angry, that nobody yelled, that everyone was quiet in the back, and that people were so respectful, okay? What a slap in the face that backwards compliment is. In my opinion, the Black community has every right to be angry, every reason in the world to demand justice, every cause to say enough is enough. And I can't even count at this point how many times so many people have come to that county board in meetings and in private. I know people that have spent hours in discussion, and probably several people here have spent hours in personal discussion with county board members, asking for justice, asking for change, asking for something actually really quite simple, this racial justice task force. And like I said, I've only been here 3 years, and the request for this task force was made many years before I was here. So the community board's callousness is seen by the community. So I just wanted to say that to this group, that people are aware of the callousness. That's why it's hard to get people mobilized in here, because they don't think the county board cares at all about them. They're also very aware of the callousness of the criminal justice system. There are videos of several of the speakers online. If you want, I'm not going to quote, I'm going to let them use their words say it all. We have videos of the speakers. If you want them, let me know. So I guess at this point, you know, what Build Programs Not Jails is sort of, you know, why I'm here tonight is just to say that when you guys do these forums, which we're really excited about, and we're trying to mobilize people to come to them, and it's not an easy task. And so what we're asking is that you create a space where people feel like they can share these very personal experiences, but also that you allow yourselves to have emotions about them, and that you act like human beings when they tell you their stories, and not like robots or emotionless automatons. So that's what we're asking. That's what I'm asking. BP&J would be more well-spoken than me. But we just ask that you show your fellow community members compassion, because all of us deserve that. And we ask that you treat the stories that they give you with the utmost respect, using them to seriously figure out what the hell is going on in that county jail and make it stop before we continue to lose lives. So I appreciate you listening to my emotional rant, and I look forward to the community forums, and we really are on our end trying to mobilize people to come out to them and contribute to the work that you're doing. Thanks.
Thank you, Christina. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions? Do
Yes,
you mind,
Christine, I want to say thank you for coming and sharing those thoughts. And I think as we reflect, only just in terms of the way, when you say the county board had no response, that's horrifying. I couldn't come because I had a conflict, but those things you can watch the county board meetings on the public television channel, so any of us who wants to see it for ourselves, we can. But I think the idea, and it's been discussed a few times in this meeting, that at our community forums, that people can't be passionate, and that's the way I say it, because it's dismissive in my mind when people say a person is being emotional. You can be passionate about a situation, or in some cases, it's perfectly appropriate to be emotional about what has happened to you or to your family. So I do, as I said, I know that came up a couple of times here, and there was some maybe fear or apprehension that people might get upset or inflamed when we heard their stories. But I said it then, and I'll say it now, and I'll say it any forums. If there's any effort to suppress people's right to righteously and legitimately share their stories, I'm gonna be on whoever's doing its ass. And that's just the truth. Right then and there, not privately after the fact. I will be doing that. So I'm putting everybody on notice.
I think most of us know that already. which is why everybody loves you. Yeah.
Christina, thanks for trying to mobilize people for our community forums. Just thanks for all the work that you do, and we know.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
It's really not, I mean, I'm just doing background boring stuff. The people who have been most impacted are really the ones that are, it only takes a few folks to bring in other people. But I just worry that if the same kind of response happens, fewer people will show up to your future ones. And just from the years and years of callousness that folks have seen, it's becoming harder and harder to get people to share their stories. So, yeah, I'm hoping, I have hope in this task force. So I'm just, yeah, we're going to encourage people to show up and hopefully they'll be heard. Yeah.
First, I wanted to thank you, and I also wanted to know, I think we had mentioned videotaping some of the conversation that happens. Do you know of any people who might be interested in doing further interviews, or can you let them know that there may be people asking to do interviews and that we're interested in those stories, just to kind of put the feelers out there so that they know going in that
Yeah,
people
I'm
might be
actually trying to work on right now, everybody that spoke on Tuesday night to come out again. And that's a big ask. It was a big ask in the beginning, but there were some really amazing voices. There's even actually some high schoolers who are niece and nephew of Toya Frazier who are also really frustrated by the lack of response and outreach to their family, who are sort of speaking out, which I think is amazing that the youth are also obviously they're impacted, but they want to say something and do something about it. So I'm trying to get them to come into a more formal setting where hopefully their experiences will be collected and valued more than they were Tuesday night. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So moving into the community events discussion, I just want to maybe lay out the idea and the concept of the format. And hopefully, Christina, if you have some input, would love to hear that too, about being sure that it is a safe place for people to share their stories, that we are using this opportunity to get to know people in the community and be a listening ear, so that we can use their stories to be a voice at a bigger level or higher level, I suppose. So I sent around this on email today, and then a couple of things here. If you didn't, well, here, if you'll pass those down. And is there anyone new on that side? Did Lynn, did you get the papers? You got them already? Okay. And then one of those, I think I gave you one already, but. So the idea is that we'll do a real brief overview of who we are, how we got to be this task force, and our mission, and thanking the sponsors, and then talking about the format of the event. So explaining to everyone in the large group, however large that group is, we don't know yet, that, we'll break into smaller groups and have more intimate discussions with the intention of gathering data and listening more closely. We can spread out throughout the venue and do that. And our task force members and maybe some of the sponsors would be facilitators for these small group discussions, with the role of asking the questions and listening and helping keep the space a safe place for everyone there, in the way that they would feel open to sharing their story. So to Mariam's point, not diminishing people's emotions. This is real, and we want to be a part of what they're going through and listening in that way. We'll utilize a circle format that is based in Indigenous ways, that uses a talking piece. That way people don't get interrupted. They have the space. Facilitators will be sure to mention, our time constraints and that we want everybody to get a chance to speak, but there won't be, time limits, so to speak. We'll just honor and respect everybody's voice, and might have to remind folks of that halfway through or so if it feels like some people aren't getting the opportunity to speak as much as they'd like to. I created this, the form that has the questions on there so that everybody has an opportunity to both see what questions are coming, and they could either jot down some notes. This was Lynn's idea here that, jot down some notes ahead of time that might help them get their thoughts in order, or take notes from what they hear from others. Or if they don't feel comfortable sharing it in the circle, they might want to say some other things on the form, and they can give that back to us. So it gives it, everybody an opportunity maybe to speak out in their comfort level. And then we'll also ask that somebody in the circle, whether it's the facilitator or another volunteer, tries to take notes on key pieces. So at the, we'll leave 30 or 45 minutes near the end so that we can hear some from the groups, so that everybody can have the benefit of hearing a little bit from every group. And again, the goal of the questions is both about stories and experiences, but also about recommendations and action steps and thought processes that we could be taking into account. So that's where this comes from, and I would love to hear any feedback, thoughts, questions, et cetera, so we can kind of formalize this. And also we need volunteers for who, I need to know who's going to be there Thursday, 1 week from today.
I just have one point of order here. On the form that I have here, Saturday, 25th had 1 to 3, and then it's crossed out 11 to 1 on mine.
That was the one I wrote on.
Oh, okay.
Did we said 11 to 1, right? Or did we say 1 to 3? I have it two different ways. The flyer says 1 to 3. Okay,
Right.
cross that off then, because I
And I
wasn't
wanted to make sure, it
Okay.
has to be 1 to 3 because that's when the facility is available.
Thank you.
Okay. Right, yeah, so.
Yeah,
I was
okay.
asking, I was trying to make sure.
I had
Okay.
a mental unclear moment.
Okay.
I was just gonna say the format section is probably enough for the agenda. If you want to, if you want to send that to Kay Rhodes, because I know that we had talked about having to put out an agenda. I think I would just cut and paste that exact thing.
The questions?
Just this, where it says format,
Oh, okay.
and like the whole rest of it, I wouldn't worry about spending any time editing, that's fine.
Great. Yeah, I think we sent the flyer also to Kay already. I'm not sure if it's been posted, but. Oh,
All right, so she understands that we need, whatever she does to publicly notice, or someone does to publicly notice county board meetings and our task force is what needs to be done with this. Has that already been communicated to her?
It will be.
Okay, all right, yeah, I think just if you could explain to her, we need her to send out the same kind of press, to whatever she does to publicly notice, or whatever is done to publicly notice a county board meeting or any other body meeting is what needs to be done for this. That's one. Second, is someone bringing name tags?
So I think we need to discuss, we've got some donations from ACLU, and I don't know if financial donations are coming from the other sponsors, artists, but how are we going to do that? Because again, we don't have anything, so maybe somebody from the organization would be willing to purchase those things and just.
I'll bring name tags and markers if nobody
Okay.
else is. I just wanted to make sure someone is, because when we're sitting
Yeah,
around.
we
people
definitely
have-
want
If they just
that.
want to put their first name, or if they want to make up a name, but just so people can be.
Absolutely.
Addressed as a human being by a
Yeah.
name. Okay, I'll bring name tags.
Thank you.
And actually, since you asked, as far as logistics on, does Church of Living God need a check next Thursday night to pay for the facility, or how are we doing that?
They're waiving the facility fee.
Oh.
So our costs are really materials and food, beverages. So
okay.
if if that could be covered by the donation, and all done at once in one way without any money having to come to somebody and out to somebody, that might be a great way
All
to
right,
do
well,
that.
if someone is buying refreshments, if they want to pay for it and get reimbursed from American Civil Liberties Union, they just need to contact me, Esther Pat, and I'll get them a check,
Okay.
so.
Do I have any volunteers for that piece of the event? Buying and bringing the food and drinks.
How do you know how much to buy and bring?
No, I
You
think-
got to
Oh, okay.
guesstimate.
All right.
We have another event Saturday, so like bottled water.
Right, could carry over.
Yes, like bottled water could carry over, so we get plenty. Even a tray of cookies or something from Sam's, if if we don't open it, you know, we can still possibly use that for Saturday. Mhm. But yeah,
I would like to think-
I'll volunteer to get the,
Thanks, Artis.
the food and beverages, that type. It's just going to be water,
Yeah.
nothing else. The NAACP, they have agreed to donate up to $100. Same way with the National Council of African American Men. So we do have some funds to you know, buy some stuff. And before we go too far, just one other thing I want to mention. Well, no, finish this, then I'll comment on something else related to this.
Well, I have a question. So are we discussing both events, Thursdays and Saturdays, or are we just discussing Thursdays right now? In terms
think
of
both.
who's gonna contribute
Oh,
what?
got it.
That's what I meant.
Okay, thanks. Artis, you're not able to be there Saturday, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
So maybe whatever's left over on Thursday, somebody would be willing to take home and bring to Saturday's event and replenish as needed? Yep, let's do that. So who is able to be at Thursday, June 23rd? Okay, so Artis, Ryan, Ellen, Esther, Kevin, Demario. And are you on Saturday?
I'm planning for Thursday, but it's iffy.
Okay, we'll have a Mabo, maybe.
Granddaughter's flying in, so.
1, 2, yeah. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What's that? Oh, 7, me. Yep, sorry. I don't know, so we'll have to check by email with those who aren't here. And then Saturday, yeah, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I'm probably, will be there too. So that's 6. So, and then I'll do an email and see if there's others who aren't here today. Is everybody that's planning to be there comfortable with being a small group facilitator? Okay, wonderful, thank you. And maybe this goes, I don't know where your question was, Artis, in this, but if, I'm thinking about the welcome, the overview, the meeting format thing, and wondering how we want to do that with, we want to have part of the sponsor group, like Esther, you asked, does somebody need to be there from ACLU? I don't think they need to, but, definitely are welcome. And then I think somebody from our team needs to help with that welcome and presentation piece.
I would say that, I mean, number one, I think we're going to need to play some of that by ear because there's, I mean, we've got a limited amount of time before these things are happening. We don't have any more meetings. So I would say that we're going to need to play some of that by ear. But as far as the introductory stuff, I think we need to basically get through that as fast as possible because the important thing is giving people plenty of time to speak.
Yeah.
So I think it should be, we're the Racial Justice Task Force. Here's our mission statement.
Right.
We were appointed by the county board. We're here to hear your stories. Here's how we're going to do it. We're going to break up into small groups. We're going to talk about some things with your facilitator. Each of you will have a facilitator, and then we're gonna come back and talk about it. And I think that would be fine for the introduction. I don't think even 10 minutes is necessary.
Okay.
Will there be a sign-in sheet?
I think there should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And, I think we'll emphasize both in that and in name tags, if people want to, they can. It's not, required or forced by any means. So I will volunteer to do the first welcome overview meeting spiel, just because I wrote it up and happy to do that. And then if somebody else wants to do it Saturday, that'd be great. But not, we can play that by ear, as you say.
No, someone volunteer now. Someone volunteer now.
Okay.
I'm not there.
Thank you.
Good. Yeah.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Good.
All right. All right. Thank you. We thank you guys for the space very much.
Sarah?
Yes.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
Is the expectation that the facilitator is also taking notes for that group? Or is,
I think it should just briefly be discussed in the small group and put out there. I mean, if somebody from the community wants to take notes, and I would say go for it.
Just make sure somebody's
but
doing it.
I think be ready to, potentially do it. And, not copiously to like detailed, but, I would hope to have real, like, highlights, from stories, and then really encourage people to write down details and recommendations and specifics on their paper that we'll ask for back, so we can use the data, and maybe some tool that the Urbana guys have. Yeah.
Yes, Sarah, be sure to mention that, because that was, I like the basic idea of the real short, just let's get rolling. But if you specifically want people, the participants themselves, to write down that, to know that we want people to talk, but if you want to make sure there's something that is recorded for, for the future work of the task force, to please write it down and to turn that sheet in at the end of the meeting. Because if you don't tell people, they might, and then afterward, they're going to go, oh, I have to write this down. The other thing, I was just going to throw this out for, we should be so lucky, but, like on Thursday night, if there are 7 of us to facilitate groups, then if there are even, if there's 45 people, yeah, that'll work as 7 small groups. If we had 100 people, just if it's, if there's a lot of people, if there's 10 people in a group, I don't think we can go through 5 questions in the time allotted, and it might be good to try to combine questions 2 and 3 and combine questions 4 and 5, just to make sure you get through it all, because you don't want to have to get, a third of the way through and then, oh, time's up. And you don't have to cut people off when they're talking to get them to do it. So I'm just suggesting that. But if it does end up that we'd have just a few dozen people and each small group has 5 people, I would think a facilitator and 5 people could get through 5 questions at a time.
Agreed, yeah, I think the small group should be 5 to 6 would be ideal. And real quick, Lynn, I just wanted to say, I think as the, opening host, we should also take on the timekeeper roles, so we can, let the groups, the whole group know, we're halfway through, we should, you should be.
The other option that gives us a comfort level, not knowing if there's going to be 20 people or 200, I assume there'll be written guidelines about how, for the facilitators, how to run a circle, because it's a beautiful process, make sure everybody has a voice. And then let's say all of a sudden we're like, crud, we need 5 more facilitators. If it's in writing, and then either you could pinch it, or I could take them in a corner and quickly tell them, and we could just quickly get several other facilitators who are not members of this task force. And literally, we've had people come before us. I just think that could do it very, very well. So that would be the option, as opposed to reducing the number of questions. I really think it's important every person who leaves feels they had a voice. That on Thursday, pinch hitting, because I'll be in Pennsylvania, but I could do that on Saturday.
Yeah, one thing, and I don't think we're going to need this, but I just throw it out there. Let's say we happen to, let's say on a Saturday, we get people there who do not have, we get in a group where the people really don't have stories to tell. I think we may want to be prepared in the sense where we may want to share some data that have been mentioned here and come up with some talking points. We could talk about, I remember we had one presentation, I'm not saying that we use this, but we had one presentation, they were talking about bail, where people, poor people in jail and can't make the bail, and they're able, and a lot of time when you stay in jail, when you sit there longer, you have a tendency, I guess the data bear out that a lot of these people get longer sentences. So the point I'm making here is that if one of facilitator get in a group where there's not many stories, and we may need some different type of talking points, we may want to look at some of the data, some of the information that we have received here to come up with maybe some solutions to wherever we decide to talk about. Just.
Does anyone have the ability to print some handouts, some of the reports and PowerPoints that we've had presented here? We don't have a budget, but I don't know if somebody has the ability to do that.
Well, again, if there are 3 co-sponsors who've each agreed to give up to $100, I don't know how much you're thinking this printing would cost, but if somebody would go do it and just present a receipt to one of the sponsoring groups, they'll get reimbursed.
Yeah, that's true.
I hate to be the naysayer, but I actually would not agree with that, and here's why. I don't think this is the forum for us to influence what people are telling. We want to hear from them, and it may not be, they may not have stories. I think there's going to be a fair number of people with stories, but we've asked really meaty questions about what do you recommend happen in the criminal justice system to help reduce racial disparity? What about outside? I would think people would want to talk for hours on those issues. And so I hate to, by giving statistics, saying, oh, well, you guys really should be talking about cash bail, because this is going to inform our decisions about what we focus on. So I say, this is my personal preference, is I want to hear as much from them, and we can talk to them later, but I want to hear from them. That's my, so I personally would not want to share statistics
I
at
think,
this point.
oh, sorry. I think we're also probably addressing a problem that we might not have. I mean, these people are all people who are there, who are coming for a reason, and it's because they care about the issue. I assume they're going to want to talk about it.
Yeah, so I was actually thinking of handouts as takeaways more. I mean, we've heard a lot of really great information and had some really great data presented to us, and people that show up at our events might also be very interested in that. And so maybe it's not beforehand, maybe it's at the end. You can pick these things up on the way out, so it's not changing the dialogue to focusing on statistics and reports. But it might be, I just thought it might be something that participants would be interested in. If I took that on to print some handouts out, specifically, again, the PowerPoints that we've, had, or the reports that we've been given, and I don't know how far I could get it printed with Kinko's or something, but like how much I could get done. But
I would say I don't see a need to print out the PowerPoints and stuff. I mean, these are people who know the issues they're facing. I mean, not statistics about it, but they know what their stories are, and that's what we're there for. We're not there to disseminate information about what we think. We're there to hear what they think.
But on the other hand, it's not, the purpose of sharing the data is to have people have concrete information about their experiences. It's sharing data. It's not leading them in any direction. It's sort of like if people came to a thing for traffic stops and then the data was shared with them, that doesn't mean that you're influencing their experience. They've already had the experience. The data is sort of like to just give concrete, because people do research. If it's not written down, then it's just anecdotal. If it's not collected in a particular way, then it's just anecdotal. But if we have some statistics or some data that is important, or particularly about the bail stuff, people may not know in a very concrete way that if you stay in jail until your trial, it influences the outcome. There's no harm in sharing that information. I'm just a person who is opposed to withholding and hoarding information. Informed people make informed decisions. So if there are, and I agree with you, usually when people come someplace, they expect to go away with something. They expect to leave with something. So maybe there could be a discussion as to what would be useful, but I certainly think it would be useful for people to know that not being able to get out of jail while your charges are pending influences your outcome. Or
what if we, part of the sign-in sheet was, do you want to receive follow-up information from the RJ task force.
That's different from people going away with something in their hand that day.
Well, I mean, my thought is if people should go away with something in their hand, it should be a schedule of the rest of our meetings. I mean, that's honestly, that's honestly the biggest thing. I mean, and it's not I'm not saying that we should withhold information. I'm saying that really, we haven't compiled the information. We aren't ready to disseminate the information in a productive way to know what the information actually is. We certainly aren't at any point where we're ready to disseminate the information, and really, the information should be disseminated, and it should be disseminated publicly when we actually do our final report. And I would hope that would have all of that information that you're talking about. So I'm not talking about withholding the information. I'm just talking about our purpose for the community forums is not to give them information, it's to get information from them. That was my point.
I think, I mean, I like the idea of giving people something to take away, and I do think the schedule of our meeting should be one of it. And I'm not, and I think, that's a very good point that we don't have everything. Well, I was just going to say, I have here the handouts, and this doesn't count stuff that's, all the things that we talked about we just have the links for the internet, but just the physical handouts that have been given us tonight through the meetings that we've had so far. And I started counting, I mean, it's over 100 pages. So I don't think it's ever good, no matter what you're doing, other than if it was a compiled report and you're telling people, oh, here's a copy of the report. I don't ever think it's a good idea to hand out 100-page things, because most of it, I mean, anywhere, even something that's 10 pages, 12, people will take it because they're interested, even to be polite, but often it won't get read, not because they're not interested, because it's just too much. And so here, I mean, there are things here like the report on the juvenile justice in Champaign County, and the Build Programs Not Jails presentation, and don't forget the traffic data thing. I mean, it's a lot. So I don't know if in the next week we can find something that, I mean, among all the things we had, that would just be, that could be a few pages, that would be give something, because I do like the idea of giving people something to have them walk away with, but I just think we need to, I don't know how we can pick which thing to give them, because these are reports prepared by other organizations. But if someone has an idea of something, you can think of like 3 pages or less that we could give out to people. Yeah, I think I'm in favor of that, if we could just decide what it is.
How about something like the artist was saying, just those points? If you stay in jail, then it influences your later case, and just a few points like that. I mean,
Well,
Is that
but
too-
how do you
too
decide which
vague?
one?
Well,
Bail happens to be a big issue of mine that I care about, so, oh yeah, I'd love that, but there's, remember, we were talking about for this whole thing, we were looking for people's input on policing, bail, sentencing, prosecution, public defender,
The
school
stuff
to jail. I mean,
before.
it's a whole bunch of stuff, and so how do you pick out just like, I mean, do we each want to throw out one factoid that we want to put, and then what's our source?
I could
We're just
think
going to
of-
put that down. I'm
we
saying
have to
that's.
I could think of
that's the
30
problem.
things from today.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
right, exactly.
Carolyn?
So perhaps what you could do is put the schedule, and then on the back, list all the different studies that have already been posted, their websites, and maybe say exactly what it is that they're talking about in it with the
That's-
website
that's
address
perfect.
listed.
Yeah.
I think.
I agree.
Thank you. Amy?
That's fine, what Carolyn said. I would not want to pass out little bits of information. We're trying to, excuse me, digest what we've learned, and to pull out a piece is so easily misinterpreted that I think it'd be okay to do that, but not to try to highlight things.
Yeah. Okay.
Sarah, just a quick comment, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
There are some, like the NAACP has a really good flyer that they've made up about how to interact with police. And I don't know if that's something we want to pass out or not, but it's something that could be done. I don't know if it-
So, yeah, I mean, they're one of the sponsors. If they want to provide some of their products, they can. Here's what I think would be good is if everyone could send me the key things they'd like to see on the back of the schedule, organizations, resources, links, by Tuesday, then I can do that, and together with the stuff we've already done, and I might have to ask Ryan for some help on the information of all the ones we've done so far. Does that sound reasonable? Cool.
Okay,
Is
yeah,
Tuesday even going to be early enough?
Tuesday's fine by me, yep.
I do want to go on record as saying I strongly discourage passing out how to interact with the police. No other community has to get a tutorial on how to not be killed by the police, and it still doesn't work. It's insulting.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you, coming from our group, it's insulting. And so, please don't do it, okay? And I think Carolyn is nodding her acquiescence. It's just offensive. That kind of behavior is just offensive. And I won't go on and say offensive 100 times, but exponentially, that's how offensive it is.
I agree.
All right, well, we'll communicate that with them, and I don't think the sponsors had any thoughts of, needing to pass anything out. And so, does any other thoughts on the community events? I'm looking at our time, we have several things left on the agenda. How do we want to proceed?
I move that we table the rest of the items on the agenda and adjourn.
Table or postpone?
Yes, postpone to next meeting.
Thank you. Second?
I do have,
Yeah, all in favor? I'm sorry, Carolyn? Yeah.
So I'm a qualitative researcher, and one of the things that really breaks my grits when I see a lot of statistics is that they don't take the story seriously and try and make sense of the data that they actually have available to them from these stories. So I would like to be able to kind of identify people to interview, or even if you ask people if they're interested in being interviewed, please get their names and their emails and their contact information so I can go back and contact them and see how we can come up with something. And I'll try and make sure I pull together some questions.
Could we just put that on this and say, would you be willing to be interviewed for this? If so, name and contact information.
Great idea.
I also have one comment, and that's with respect to the social media piece. Is this flyer being fleshed out on social media or what?
We can all do that personally, and with our affiliated organizations, we don't, as an entity, have a social media account.
Yeah, I know that's on the agenda,
Yeah.
that's why I'm asking.
That was, I think, the idea was to talk about whether we were ready to, or wanting to do that.
I presented the idea because I shared the press release with news, but if news media had a Facebook page or had a Facebook page that didn't have an email, I still want to send it to their Facebook page. I'll do that personally with my Facebook account, but I wanted to discuss doing that as a group. But it's okay that we don't have to do that tonight. I have a list of the media organizations I sent emails to. I'll do the same on their Facebook pages next week. But certainly you're allowed to share that on your behalf, share this flyer with whomever and whichever organizations are on Facebook and you see fit. So I certainly encourage everyone to do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And continuing to share. Are we confirmed for a video camera at both events?
I'm going to check with them and see if it's available, but yeah, it should be. I mean, they didn't act like there was a problem, so I have to make a reservation, then go get it and take it back to them. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I think, again, making it available for people who would like an interview, be willing to tell their story, but not to be capturing conversations that are private and, so it would just be set off to the side
Yeah,
and
I'd
have
just
a
like to get
space for it. yeah.
headshots if they want
Right,
to go on.
if they want to,
film.
yep.
Yeah.
And
to
so I
clarify,
guess we
when you-
would
excuse
need a
me, to
waiver of
clarify,
some
when you
sort.
say private conversation, you mean people, in the small group, there is,
Right.
we're not, no one can
No,
videotape, but, okay.
I
good.
Exactly.
never wanted
We want,
to.
okay. good.
Yep,
Just wanna
thank
be
you
clear.
for clarity on that. And do you have a form maybe that you've used to get people's okay to be videoed? Okay, thank you. You could just bring it if you want. You're gonna be there Thursday, yeah? No. Yes, send it to me by Tuesday. That'd be great. Okay, so we had a motion to postpone items and adjourn. We had a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks.